There were 7 text messages. Not 1. Not 3. 7. The first was harmless, just a thumbs-up emoji. The second was a meme. But the third? Last night was wild. I can still smell you on me, smiling face with horns. She was in the shower when I saw it. She had left her phone face up on the kitchen counter while I was slicing an orange. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't even curious. I was trying to queue up a podcast. I didn't mean to see anything. But once I did, I tapped it. Of course I did. You would have too. I scrolled. The 4th message was from him. His name was saved as Jeremy, work, which already felt like a sick joke. I'd never met a Jeremy in her office. Can't stop thinking about the elevator. Your trouble. Then another. I dreamt about your dress. You in it. You out of it. Still hard thinking about it. Then silence. Then a photo. She had sent him something. I couldn't see what. Just a blurry thumbnail, maybe a mirror selfie. I didn't want to tap it. I didn't want proof. My hands were shaking so badly the orange rolled off the counter. That was 5 minutes before she came back into the kitchen, towel drying her hair, singing like nothing had changed. I stood there, still holding the paring knife. Still pretending I hadn't just seen my entire marriage turn into a cartoonish cliché. And you know what she said to me? Not good morning. Not, you look upset. She said, Lyle, can we stop making everything about you? You're not my priority right now. Not my priority. I smiled. I actually smiled. That weird, robotic smile you give your boss when they tell you your position has been phased out. She poured her coffee. She didn't even look up when she said it. I nodded, wiped my hands with a dish towel, placed the knife on the edge of the sink, and said the calmest words I've ever spoken. Okay, then don't make me your afterthought either. She blinked. What does that mean? But I was already walking to the bedroom. I didn't pack much. A few shirts. My watch. Passport. I took the dog's leash, but not the dog. She loved the dog. Let her have something left to love. By the time she figured out what was happening, I was already driving. No music. No GPS. Just road and rage. What she didn't know yet was that I had already transferred everything. Money, accounts, even the house deed. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning erasure. And the truth? That was just the beginning. I was 2 towns away when my phone buzzed for the first time. I didn't check it. I couldn't. I knew it was her. Tessa. Probably still barefoot in the kitchen, blinking at the front door like it had personally betrayed her. I could almost hear her voice in my head, still trying to spin it, still trying to make herself the victim. But I kept driving. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I needed distance. Not space. Distance. Emotional. Physical. Legal, if possible. The roads were still wet from last night's rain, and the radio was broken, so all I had were my thoughts. And her voice in them. Lyle, you're just sensitive. Lyle, I never said we were exclusive when we first started dating, remember? Lyle, you make everything heavier than it is. I kept hearing those lines on repeat, like little poison seeds she'd planted over the years. Gaslight grenades. I used to think she was just blunt, honest. Now I realize she was always rewriting the story mid-chapter. She was the author and the critic, and I was just another character who didn't know I'd been written out. But here's where it gets twisted. That afternoon, I stopped at a diner about 40 miles out. Dusty little place, all checkered floors and bad coffee. I ordered something I didn't want just so I could sit, think, breathe. There was a family in the corner booth, 2 kids, both laughing at a spilled milkshake, and something about it made me want to scream. Not because I wanted kids, or because we'd tried and failed, but because once, years ago, she and I had laughed like that. That same sound. It echoed through me like an old voicemail. And then, my phone buzzed again. I pulled it out, hesitated, then hit play on the last voicemail. And her voice came through. But it wasn't the voice I expected. It wasn't panicked. It wasn't remorseful. It was venomous. If you're trying to punish me, just know you're not the one being clever here. You leaving? It's not some grand move, Lyle. It's childish. I've already had real men in my life. Men who know what they want. You were always so soft. I sat there, the coffee going cold in my hand. Soft. It didn't even sting. Not like it should have. I think that was the most jarring part, the numbness. I realized in that moment that I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I was detached. Finally. And when I clicked the next voicemail, everything shifted. Because the second message wasn't for me. It was for someone named Jeremy. But she'd accidentally sent it to my number. He finally left. I'm actually relieved. I thought he'd cry or beg or something pathetic, but nope. He just walked out. Kind of cold. Anyway, I'm heading to your place tonight. Let's celebrate, babe. That was the exact moment something in me clicked. Not broken. Not cracked. Clicked. Something mechanical. Cold. Purposeful. I stood up, left a 20 on the table, and walked out without my food. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't even emotional neglect anymore. This was erasure, and she thought she'd get away with it. But I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to scream into the phone. I was going to rewrite the ending. Quietly. Strategically. Completely. And Jeremy? He had no idea that I'd already been inside his apartment before either of them knew my name. I didn't go to Jeremy's to fight him. I didn't even go there to confront him. That would have been too theatrical. Too loud. And I'd spent far too many years being quiet for the sake of keeping the peace. No. I went there to see how replaceable I really was. His apartment wasn't far from the diner. I found it easily. I'd driven past it once before, months earlier, when Tessa said she was doing a team-building night at her boss's condo nearby. I didn't question it then. I do now. It was a tired-looking building. Brown bricks, chipped intercom panel, second-floor unit with a view of a liquor store and a dented mailbox. Very glamorous for the man who supposedly made her feel alive again. I parked on the side street and waited. 10 minutes. 15. Then I saw her. She got out of a rideshare, wearing the same black jacket I bought her last Christmas, the one she said made her feel mature. Funny. She wore it to cheat on me. She walked up to the door like she'd done it 100 times. No hesitation. No knock. She pulled out a key and let herself in. I waited a few more minutes before getting out of the car. I didn't have a plan. I wasn't thinking like a husband or even like a man. I was thinking like someone studying the aftermath of a fire. I needed to see what had been reduced to ash. I needed to understand how casually it had all been torched. When I got to the door, it was unlocked. That detail still unsettles me. Not because it was careless, but because it was bold, confident, like they didn't believe anyone could hurt them in that space. I didn't go inside. I'm not stupid. I just turned the knob and stepped 1 foot into the shadow of their world. What I saw wasn't shocking. It was dull, really. A half-drunk wine bottle on the table. Her shoes already off. Her laughter, loud, unfiltered, the kind she hadn't given me in years. Then came his voice. God, it's nice not having to sneak around anymore. My heart didn't shatter. It didn't even tremble. Instead, I felt this bizarre clarity. That's the only way I can describe it. Like when you're underwater too long and finally break the surface. I pulled out my phone. I hit record. 1 click. No drama. Then I stepped back, quietly closed the door, and left. Back in my car, I sent the audio to my personal email. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to remind myself later that I didn't imagine this. That I wasn't overreacting. That I hadn't invented the slow disappearance of my marriage. But what happened next wasn't about them. It was about me. Because while they were uncorking cheap wine and toasting to my erasure, I was on the phone with a private notary. I transferred my business shares to my cousin. I locked my credit cards. I scheduled mail forwarding. I called the bank and put every shared account on freeze. Then, I made one final call. To a woman named Verna, a friend I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. A woman who owed me a favor. She answered on the second ring. You still doing off-grid relocations? I asked. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, How far off-grid are we talking, Lyle? I looked back at Jeremy's building, and I smiled. Far enough that she'll think I've died. But not so far I can't watch what happens when she realizes I haven't. Verna didn't ask too many questions. She never had. That was her gift, silence with purpose. She ran a consultancy most people never heard of, helping clients disappear legally, but permanently. Tech guys escaping lawsuits. Survivors of abusive homes. The occasional eccentric millionaire who wanted to live off the land. And now me. She gave me 72 hours. That's how long I had before my paper trail started dissolving. We began with the phones. She walked me through a series of steps that seemed harmless on the surface. Deleting apps, resetting accounts, calling my provider, and requesting a dormant switch tied to a shell company. Within an hour, Tessa wouldn't be able to reach me. Not by text. Not by call. Not even by location sharing. Then came the real work. Closing leases, bank accounts, memberships. Every place that had my name was either purged or rewritten. I was still legally alive, but to anyone looking, I was offline in every way that mattered. The plan wasn't revenge. It was disruption. You see, people like Tessa, they thrive on certainty. They want to know you're suffering. They want to see the breakdown, the spiral, the rage. But when you take that away, when you vanish with no explanation, that's when the unraveling begins. Day 1, she didn't call. Day 2, I saw a missed call from a blocked number. Likely her. I didn't answer. Day 3, Verna texted me. She's pinged your email recovery. Might escalate soon. I smiled without meaning to. Tessa had always been the type to keep things graceful on the surface. But underneath, chaos when control slipped. And now, the man she so easily replaced had just slipped through her fingers. I was staying in a cabin 2 states over, nestled deep in the hills, hidden behind a Forest Service access road. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't warm. But it was quiet. And in that silence, I started peeling off the parts of me that were hers. Her favorite shirts I used to wear? Gone. Her books I pretended to enjoy? Tossed in a bin. I even erased our Spotify history. Song by song. Playlist by playlist. I didn't want her voice echoing in my head anymore, even in the form of music. Then, something odd happened. Verna called. She posted something. You want to know? I hesitated. Tell me. It's a photo of her on a balcony. Wine glass. Caption says, finally free. Some people were just meant to be lessons, not lifelines. My stomach turned, not from pain, but pity. That caption? That wasn't power. That was panic dressed up in poetry. She thought I'd see it. She thought I'd be watching from the shadows, crying over my laptop. But the truth was, I didn't feel sadness. I felt momentum. She was cracking already, because I refused to be her plot twist. I wasn't coming back. I wasn't texting at 2 a.m. I wasn't haunting her inbox with "Can we talk?" messages. I was gone. And that kind of absence? It's louder than any goodbye. By the end of that week, Jeremy had blocked her. I know because Verna tracked it through a breadcrumb trail, private posts, removed tags, a deleted story featuring 2 wine glasses, and only one now. Tessa wasn't used to this. To silence. To being the one left. And I wasn't done disappearing yet. Because there was one last thing I had to erase, something that had been gnawing at me since that voicemail. The house. She thought she still had it. But what she didn't know was that I'd signed it over 6 weeks ago to someone she'd never expect. And that knock on the door she heard late Saturday night? It wasn't me. It was the new owner. She didn't recognize the man at first. He stood on the porch like he'd been there 1,000 times before. Calm, hands in pockets, face unreadable. No clipboard, no badge, just presence. That alone made her uneasy. It was 9:18 p.m. on a Saturday. She was wearing a robe, hair still damp, her 3rd glass of wine untouched on the counter. The dog barked once and went silent, the only thing in the house that still noticed unexpected guests. She opened the door just a crack. Can I help you? The man smiled politely. I'm here about the house. Her brow furrowed. What about it? It's mine. The pause between his sentence and her reaction could have stretched across continents. She blinked once. Twice. I'm sorry, what did you just say? He pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Not official looking. Not dramatic. Just a printout. Deed transfer. Effective date. For weeks ago. My name's Rory Caudale. You may want to contact your husband for clarification. And then the line she'll never forget. Actually, sorry, ex-husband. She slammed the door in his face. Of course. Classic Tessa. Anger before understanding. Noise before thought. She stormed back to the kitchen, grabbed her phone, and called me. Or tried to. The number was no longer in service. Next, she opened her email. Nothing from me. No forwarded documents. No digital trail. Just a blank silence where my presence used to live. She must have sat on the floor for hours. I imagine her with her back against the fridge, wine glass in one hand, phone in the other, refreshing her inbox like it could undo a reality she hadn't anticipated. And that's the thing, she hadn't anticipated any of this. Tessa always played emotional chess, not paperwork. She was great at shifting blame mid-argument, at twisting meaning mid-sentence. But she never bothered to read the fine print. She never realized that while she was busy performing freedom, I was building an exit strategy so precise, so cold, that by the time she smelled the smoke, the fire had already moved on. What she didn't know was that Rory wasn't a stranger. He was my mother's lawyer. Semi-retired. Kind eyes. A man who'd once drawn up our will when we thought we might start a family. He didn't know all the details, just enough to protect me. Enough to sign the right papers. Enough to show up with confidence and say, This property is no longer in your name. By Sunday morning, she was gone. Packed a few bags, left the wine, left the dog, left a half-eaten peach on the counter like some weird symbol of what was left of her control. Rory texted me a photo later. The place looked exactly as I'd left it. Except for one thing. A single post-it on the fridge. Scrawled in her handwriting. If you wanted me to hurt, you won. But that's where she misunderstood me again. This wasn't about hurting her. This was about ending the conversation. Every marriage ends twice. Once when someone says it out loud, and once when someone finally walks away. But not many people know what happens when one person disappears before the other realizes the story's over. That's what I had become. The blank space after the final word. The silence after the credits roll. And that silence? It's where her panic started to bloom. She tried messaging my cousin, my old boss, even Verna, which made me laugh. But all she found were more locked doors. More people unwilling to answer. More signs that I wasn't somewhere to be found. I was somewhere to be forgotten. But of course, she wasn't going to go down easy. Because 2 days later, Verna sent me a video. Tessa, looking straight into the phone camera, sitting in her car outside what used to be our favorite Thai restaurant. Tears in her voice. Smirk on her face. You can run, Lyle. You can even disappear. But you and I both know you're still watching. She was half right. I wasn't watching. I was recording. And what I was about to do next would make her realize that for the first time in her life, the plot was no longer hers to write. She was unraveling. Not in the dramatic, mascara streaming down her face kind of way. That would have required vulnerability. No. Tessa came undone the way people like her always do, strategically, bitterly, and loud enough for an audience. She started posting cryptic messages on social media. The kind that beg for attention but wear the costume of independence. Healing isn't linear. Some people only exist to teach you how to never be treated again. Sometimes strength is walking away from what never saw you. She didn't tag me, of course. That would have made it real. She wanted the narrative, not the truth. She wanted control of the version of us that people saw. And when she realized she couldn't reach me directly, she reached out sideways. She messaged Rory, the man who now legally owned our home, pretending to be worried about me. Said I'd gone missing. That she was concerned for my mental health. That if something bad happened, she'd never forgive herself. The same woman who told her affair partner. I thought he'd cry or beg or something pathetic. Rory didn't respond. So she tried Verna. Verna screenshot the entire message chain and sent it to me with a single caption. She's turning the sympathy faucet on full blast. Then she tried something riskier. She reached out to my older brother, Grant. They were never close. Tessa always said he was too intense, too straight-edged. She'd called him a control freak once at Christmas after he asked her not to drink so much in front of the kids. But she called him anyway, and for reasons I still don't understand, he answered. The call lasted 11 minutes. I know because Grant left me a voicemail afterward. Not to support her, but to ask me why I never told him the whole story. Why I let her twist it. Why I hadn't said a word. Lyle, he said, you didn't just leave her. You disappeared. You didn't even tell me. That's not strength, man. That's isolation. That voicemail hit harder than I expected. I didn't respond. Not to him. Not to anyone. Instead, I opened a file I hadn't touched in weeks. A copy of our shared cloud storage. Years of photos, videos, receipts, vacation plans, old scanned letters, digital clutter we never cleaned up. And somewhere in that mess was the crack in her story. It started with a blurry video from 2 summers ago. A birthday party at her coworker's place. Jeremy was there. I recognized him now. His smirk, the watch, the crooked stance. He was standing too close to her. His hand on her back for too long. Everyone thought they were just being playful, but there was a familiarity in his movements. A comfort. I froze the frame. Enhanced it. There was something on her wrist. A bracelet. Not just any bracelet. The one she told me she lost 3 years ago during a spa weekend with friends. A piece I bought her for our anniversary. I remember her crying when she said she'd misplaced it. Said it made her feel like she'd lost part of me. But in that video, she was wearing it. And Jeremy noticed. He touched it gently. Whispered something. She smiled. That's when I knew. This didn't start recently. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment thing. It had been years. Years of pretending. Of slipping out of our life and into his. I felt nothing. No rage. No heartbreak. Just clarity. That cold, Precise clarity that comes when the puzzle clicks into place. And suddenly, all her games, the voicemails, the cryptic captions, the messages to my family, they weren't attacks. They were desperation. Because deep down, Tessa knew something I hadn't admitted out loud. She didn't lose me when she slept with Jeremy. She lost me when I realized she was never planning to stop. And now, she wasn't trying to win me back. She was trying to make sure I didn't expose her. But it was too late. Because I'd just discovered something in the storage files that even she forgot she saved. A PDF. A signed letter. From her HR department. An internal complaint. Filed 6 months ago. Not against Jeremy, but against another man. A man she called dangerously persistent. A man she claimed was harassing her at work. And that man wasn't real. He didn't exist. The letter was a lie. A cover. An insurance policy in case Jeremy ever turned on her. And now I had it. The first real piece of evidence that proved she wasn't just a liar. She was a manipulator. And she'd left the matchbook in her own gasoline-soaked trail. The document sat on my screen like it was waiting for my permission to destroy her. But I didn't send it anywhere. Not right away. I saved it. Encrypted it. Made 4 copies. One on a cloud backup. One on a flash drive hidden under the floorboard in the cabin. One emailed to Verna. And one sent to a private inbox only accessible through a VPN. Not because I was planning anything illegal, but because I knew how slippery she was. How quickly she could twist a narrative into a lifeline. How she could cry and accuse and redirect all in the same breath. This time, there would be no open accusations. No angry emails. No gotcha moments. I wasn't going to confront her. I was going to let the infrastructure around her do the job for me. The first step was simple. I submitted an anonymous tip to her company's HR department. Just a link. No commentary. Just that PDF, her own document, the one she created, signed, and filed months earlier. Only this time, I attached metadata. A subtle modification date that showed she had accessed the file again, recently, from a new device. Her lie wasn't just old. It was ongoing. The second step? I left a voicemail for Jeremy. I didn't speak. I just played back the audio she accidentally sent me weeks ago, the one where she laughed and called him a filler, the man she used to distract herself from the life she didn't want to fix. Then I hung up. No threats. No names. Just silence. Within 48 hours, the fallout began. Tessa's LinkedIn profile quietly went offline. Her professional Instagram stopped posting. Someone anonymous, but not me, submitted a request to freeze her work accounts citing pending investigation. Verna later confirmed it. HR was doing a discreet internal audit. Not because of me, but because the document raised red flags. The man she had accused, the dangerously persistent one, wasn't in the system. Had never existed. And when asked for more details, Tessa stonewalled. She didn't have a backup story. Because she never expected to be questioned. That's the difference between truth and performance. Truth survives under pressure. Lies need scripts. Jeremy, meanwhile, did something I didn't expect. He called my brother. Why? I have no idea. But Grant forwarded me the voicemail. Hey, this is probably weird. I just need to know if Lala's okay. I think I made a mistake. Just tell him I get it now. He sounded small. Like a child in a burned-down house wondering where the matches came from. I didn't reply. Not to Jeremy. Not to Grant. Not to anyone. Instead, I watched quietly, as the story she built started to deconstruct itself. Tessa had spent her whole life as the main character. Her stories, her pace, her edits. But now the camera had stopped following her. The audience was gone. The spotlight turned off. And she was just standing there, alone, off script. I know she tried reaching out to people. Verna said she contacted her once more. This time not with anger, but confusion. She said she didn't understand what was happening. That she didn't even know who to blame. That part made me pause. Because that's how you know someone's not innocent. When they're not looking for what went wrong, but who did it to them. The idea that she might be responsible? That never entered her mind. But the final crack came later. A message to a mutual friend. A woman named Iris. Someone we hadn't spoken to in years. Tessa didn't know I still spoke to Iris occasionally. She didn't know Iris had her own history with manipulation and saw right through people like her. The message said, if you hear from Lyle, tell him I'm sorry. But also tell him he's not a saint. He broke me too. He disappeared like a coward instead of facing what we both caused. Iris sent it to me with a note that simply read, she still doesn't get it. but she's starting to feel it. That night, I stood on the porch of the cabin and watched a lightning storm roll in across the valley. Not poetic, not metaphorical, just real. Nature doing what it does best, breaking and cleansing at the same time. And I realized something. I didn't want revenge anymore. I didn't want recognition or closure or apologies. What I wanted was to never have to hear her voice again. But fate had one more move left. Because the next morning, I opened my email and found a message from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line, no signature, just 5 words. You think this is over? The email sat unopened for 3 days. You think this is over? 5 words. No punctuation, no name, no warmth, just noise. I didn't respond. Not because I was afraid or because I didn't care, but because there was nothing left to say. I had already spoken in the clearest language possible: disappearance. A sentence with no reply. Verna asked if I wanted her to trace the IP address. I said no. That wasn't the point. Knowing who sent it wouldn't change anything. It could have been Tessa. It could have been Jeremy. It could have been a friend of hers trying to check in behind a mask of intimidation. It didn't matter, because by then, I was no longer in it. I was beyond it. The cabin lease ended at the close of that month. I packed everything into 2 duffel bags, donated what I didn't need, and left the keys under a stone by the back steps. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need a trace. My next stop wasn't dramatic. It was a small town up north. A place with mountains that caught fire in the fall and rivers that didn't care about phone reception. I found a job managing inventory at a local hardware store. Quiet. Simple. No meetings, no emails. Just tools and shelves and the rhythm of ordinary days. The owner, a woman in her 60s named Norma, asked why I left my corporate past. I told her the truth. I got tired of being around people who measured love by how useful you were. She nodded, handed me the keys to the back office, and never asked again. I rented a modest place, 2 rooms, slanted roof, wide windows. I bought a plant. I started cooking again. I learned how to patch drywall, split firewood, fix my own sink. I started writing in a leather notebook I found at a garage sale. Not stories about the past, not memories of her. Just thoughts. 1 page a day. Some days, just a sentence. And somewhere in the middle of that silence, I felt whole again. It wasn't a sudden thing. It came slowly, like your hearing returning after you've been underwater too long. Like color leaking back into an old photo. There was no aha moment. Just one morning, I brewed coffee and realized I hadn't thought about her in days. I didn't hate her. I didn't miss her. I just let go. Iris texted me once, months later. Said she ran into Tessa in a bookstore. Said she looked thinner. Edgy. Still talking too much about healing, not enough about truth. She asked about you. Iris wrote. Said she figured you were off somewhere watching it all. I replied with 1 word. Nope. Because that was the real ending. Not revenge. Not destruction. Not even closure. Just the fact that I was finally living a life that had nothing to do with her. I think she always feared being forgotten. And maybe that's the best justice there is. So, if you're still reading this, wondering if walking away was cowardly, wondering if disappearing makes you weak, I'll say this. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave without needing to be seen leaving. And sometimes the happiest ending is the one they never get to watch.